I started here, I started doing exit interviews because, again, I think you can get some valuable data. However, I really want to focus on doing check-ins with employees. For the employees that I have gotten to know really well, I can kind of sense when something's off and I can kind of dig, but it's a lot harder. And the more we grow, it's going to be even harder to do that, especially being from all over the place. So I think that's going to be very valuable in making sure that we're getting out in front of potential problems before they become a big problem. What's more important to me is them having those one-on-one conversations, them taking that and actually, reading the employee self-assessment, which is something that we've never done before. That type of information for a manager is huge because, most employees are not going to come to you and say, hey, I'm about to go apply for another job because I don't think you appreciate me. Most people aren't that vocal.
All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the HR Heroes podcast. I'm excited because me and Heather Saxon are here today. Heather is the Vice President of Human Resources at Rycon Construction, Inc. And we're going to have an amazing conversation today about your personal journey in HR, how the landscape is changing, the mindset that comes with a leader of the future, mental health, and so many other societal pressures. But before we kind of get into that, Heather, I want to ask you a humanistic question because this is all about human resources. How's your heart doing today?
It's doing good. It's doing good. It's been a crazy busy week, but I actually just hired 2 new people on my team, and it's been a fun week of training, and it's been kind of fun watching them watch the connections start to click and everything. And they both had some good parting words before the weekend, thanking me for being patient and stuff. And it just really, it made me feel a lot better than I was probably a couple weeks ago when I was kind of in the weeds a little bit. So
I feel that. One of my favorite leaders right now is a CEO named Layla Hormozi. Mm-hmm. And I was at a business conference a couple weeks ago, and she said, "Do not judge me on our business results, but judge me on the growth of my team around me." And I thought that was just an amazing kind of, I would say, mindset of a leader, because it's not always about the business, but it's about helping other people grow and cultivating the best possible, I would say, results out of them. And that's what we should really be judged on as a leader, not the results of our business, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. I've watched, I have a young lady that works for me she's going to be elevated to payroll manager here at the end of July. And I've watched her grow and blossom and really start to take ownership of stuff. And I actually feel like kind of like a proud mama bear, like I helped get her there. Obviously she's the one doing the work and putting the effort in, but to really and I'm watching her lead other people now and kind of helping coach her into that. And yeah, I think that is a much better way to judge leadership and true success there than just numbers.
A couple seconds ago, you had mentioned patience. Mm-hmm. How do you kind of position patience in your leadership style?
I try to put myself in someone else's shoes. Remember that everyone doesn't think the way I think. People maybe don't have the same skill set that I do. It's really just putting myself in other people's shoes that gives me a lot of patience, even when I don't want to have any. And I'm not a super patient person by nature. I'm a little bit more on the high strung side, but I just try to remember that, everyone's not built the same way.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that patience is a superpower. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I try and focus on in my personal and my professional development is, if we give ourselves the air cover, if you will, of patience, it gives us a lot more time to kind of test things, try new stuff, fail, reiterate, pivot. And when we have patience with ourselves and we're willing to kind of work now quickly in the moment, but patience for the results, it's a beautiful place to be able to kind of figure stuff out, and it gives us grace as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the things that I want to kind of lead into here is one of the great things that we do about the podcast is we connect you with our previous guest by having them ask you a question. So our question is coming from a leader in the HR space from a company called My Real CV. His name is Dylan Lavis. And he has a really interesting question. I want to kind of see how you're going to answer this. His question is, if you could teach me something about your industry or discipline in the next 2 minutes, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good one. Something very interesting about the construction industry. I thought it was interesting when I came here. I didn't realize like the very slim profit margins. You know, you see construction happening all around you, and obviously there's lots of money going into these projects. You know, you see price tags like, you know, maybe we're doing a hospital for $100 million, but that revenue's all coming in, but it costs a lot. I mean, most people in business know there's a cost of doing business, and the margins that we have to operate on cause a lot of really in um, really creative thinking to try to figure out how to get the job done and try to squeak out as much profit as possible. So I kind of have really enjoyed working in this industry compared to other past industries that I've been in, where maybe I had the fancy tools or I had, you know, bigger budgets. I actually find it invigorating to have to put my thinking cap on and problem solve. And I love the creativity around here. Like it's a buzz around here because of that, because everybody has to do it, from accounting to marketing to HR to our operations teams. So that would probably be what I find the most interesting about the space that I work in now.
Creativity is such an interesting concept to me because when I think of construction, I think of process, format, cost of goods, wood, nails, screws, construction, you know what I mean? Concrete. But I don't think about the creative hat that we have to put on to be able to accomplish our goals. And we think about kind of shrinking margins, if you will, because of
Mm-hmm.
the inflation and cost of everything. You really
Right.
do have to be creative in so many different areas of the business. What is a
Mm-hmm.
way in which you think you've had to be most creative recently in how you kind of approached your role?
Just trying to figure out what resources I can tap into from current vendors and really, you know, like in the benefits field, like taking advantage of all the low cost, or dare I say free. I know there's not a whole lot that's free anymore, but making sure I'm maximizing the value out of everything that I am doing. And sometimes asking my team to um, do things a little bit more on the manual side. Not necessarily totally manual, but you know, I hate getting into the total automation thing because I feel like we're going to lose touch of actual thinking and thought process. So um, most recently was probably the rollout of our performance management. Like I did, you know, I wrote the questions. You know what I mean? Like I worked with my team on that, and we we had to do a lot of in-house training, a lot of hand holding. It's going on right now, our first like full blown assessment period, and it's definitely been challenging, and just trying to figure out the best ways to get information out to a bunch of people at the same time effectively um, has been a little bit hairy, but
I feel like being able to step up to the challenge is something that when we develop that skill set, we can continue to leverage it over and over again. I think about just the process of going through an idea. We always have an idea that everything's going to go perfect. And then real life kind of pops up and says, it's not going to work this way. And so we have to
right.
be able to really kind of cultivate that idea of how we can approach a situation differently and pivot into a different
Mm-hmm.
area to be effective, which I feel like is just like such a superpower that I feel like more people need to lean into. And I feel like that in itself is kind of a great pivot for, or kind of how I want to introduce you and your story to everybody who's watching and listening today, because I know that your journey into HR wasn't exactly conventional, but I know
Mm-mm.
you've taken lots of twists and turns. So why don't you kind of give us a background story of where you got started and how you kind of ended up where you're at today?
Yeah, so I went to Penn State for business management and marketing. Um, I don't know, I've always had a little bit of natural leadership tendencies, and at the time when I was 18 and in college, business seemed like a good starting point. Like I could always go back and get another degree, but at least I could fall back on that, and it's pretty generalized and universal. So then I kind of took a little detour. I moved down to Florida. And I took a job down there. I was in my early 20s, and I took a job and I got involved in payroll. And I worked with the HR team there, and it was a smaller company, so you know, typically in those types of organizations, you're kind of a Jack or Jane of all trades, doing lots of different things. And that's where I kind of really got the spark for it. Um, so when I had moved to Florida, I hadn't totally finished my degree yet. So I was still kind of working on it. That was just at the start of when online classes were starting up and becoming a thing. And so whenever I decided to go dedicate more time to finishing up my degree, I decided that that's kind of the path I wanted to take. I loved working with people. I loved getting to interact with everybody. Um, but then personally, life had other plans for me. So I had to move back home when the individual I moved down to Florida with, when we parted ways. And when I moved back home, I was very fortunate to have parents that were like, "Come on, come move back in." And at the time, I had to take a job to get back on my feet. Um, and I got in at Verizon Wireless, knowing that I had an interest in HR, but they they don't hire from the outside typically. Like you have to be an insider first before you get to some of those coveted positions. So I took a customer service role. They figured out that I was good at talking to people and people would buy stuff off me. So I went kind of down the sales path for a while. And then um, my true passion to like help people and have a purpose every day, not knocking people in sales. I know they have a purpose as well, but my uh, really strong purpose of being able to do for others kept calling louder and louder. So I took an opportunity in hospitality as a payroll HR um, manager, and then was there for almost 6 years, and then knew I wanted bigger and better things, and I was going to be able to get there. I was in a space where it was very limited. It wasn't going to have a lot of growth, so I cleaned off the old resume, and I was a little selective and just applying for things that really sparked my interest. And I saw this um, opportunity, and then once I heard about it, I jumped on it, and that's how I came here. I was Rycon's first HR anything outside of a consultant that they had in the past, and I think initially, coming in, they were hoping for me to take over, the benefits and the payroll and some employee relations stuff, and it has totally blossomed into a much bigger much bigger thing. I started off, an HR department of one with about we had about 450 employees at the time, company wide, in four offices. And in my 6 years here, I've I have a team of five under me in HR. I also manage our IT department here, and the company has doubled in size. And we've not only doubled in the size of offices, we're about to open another one in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is super exciting. And yeah, that's kind of how I got to here. So it's been a fun ride.
It's been an explosive ride. I
It has
mean, the
been.
growth that you guys have experienced is mind blowing to think about. And the fact that you guys are getting into different states and you have multiple offices
Mhm.
opening up, I think is something that's difficult to appreciate unless you have it. And I only say that
Yeah.
because in our previous conversation, you mentioned an offhanded comment that your CEO said to you. He said, "Hey, I didn't know what we were missing until you got here," which I feel like
Yes.
is such a compliment.
Yes. Yeah. And I get that from people a lot, that, having an HR team here and having people to take care of our employees so that they can get back to doing what it is that we're having them do and take care of our clients has been huge. And I love when other employees share compliments, not a compliment for me, but a compliment just in general for the team, and having it here, because I know HR is looked at. I call us part of the necessary evils club. Accounting's in there, marketing, IT. You have to have us in a business to be successful, but really having people that really value that and see it is it's really touching to me. It really makes me feel like there's a reason why I come in and do it every day, beyond why most of us work, which is a paycheck. But I really take a lot of pride in that.
I want to talk about kind of I would say, reformulating the reputation of HR, because one of the conversations that we have on the podcast a lot is kind of the misconception of the necessary evils, like you said. Looked at HR as once upon a time a business department. It was the payroll people, it was the paper pushers, policies and procedures, often looked at as the angel of death. So, how
Yes.
do you think kind of the space in itself has evolved over the years to make sure that that evil is more and more necessary for the continuous growth of the organization, because the people are the most important element of it?
Yeah, I really think that companies in the forefront, and since then more have jumped on the bandwagon since they've seen the success. But those really forward-thinking individuals, I think it's Richard Branson that said, "If you take care of your people, they'll take care of your clients." And it's the truth. If your people are happy and they love what they do, they're going to be their best at it, and our clients are going to be happy in turn. And I really think that that has shifted significantly, and companies are recognizing that HR deserves a seat at the table on the corporate level, and that you can use can't talk this afternoon, strategic HR to really drive your goals and help get you there. And I'm very fortunate to work with an organization that does believe in that believes in the value behind it, and they know that we're not just here to be. I call it code enforcement officers. Like I'm, that's your manager's job to, implement the rules and hold people accountable. We can certainly help coach them if they don't know how to do that. But, I say that all the time. We're not going to be the bad guys. We're going to be providing that good service to everybody, the managers and employees alike. And I really think that that has been a big part of how we've been able to grow over the last several years and continue to grow.
I love the example by Richard Branson, because if you take care of your people, they're going to take care of everything else. And
Yep.
sometimes I feel like, especially one of the misconceptions that we think about in the construction industry is that everybody is super hard nosed, very masculine, very, I'm going to get the job done, show up, don't
Yeah.
complain. But it seems like you've done an amazing job at cultivating a culture where you're going to stand up for your team members, even
Hmm.
when they can't stand up for themselves. And I want to kind of use that as a pivot into some of the challenges that I've been reading about recently about mental health in the construction industry. Seems to be at an all-time low. There's a lot of suicides that are happening. There's a lot of substance use. There's a lot of challenges that people are facing. So how do you kind of think about rewriting that narrative about helping people stand up for themselves, who often maybe have a stigma in saying, I'm okay, I don't need to raise my hand for help, because it's so easy from the masculine perspective and the female perspective to kind of just
Hmm.
keep pushing through, which I know is something that you're incredibly passionate about, for standing up for others.
Yes. So not only do I really work on coaching with my managers to bring the human element back in and realize that, you know, yes, while we are paying someone to do a job and we have certain expectations, that we need to remember that there are other factors involved. These are human beings, they're not robots. This isn't an assembly line. And that has been very instrumental at even people, I've had managers that have called me up that are like, I'm ready to fire this person. And I'm like, have you had a conversation with them? Have you talked to them about what's going on? Is their behavior different? I can sometimes sense from hundreds of miles away, just having a conversation with an employee that I know really well, even if I don't know them that well, and they just seem off, and just saying, hey, is everything okay? Is everything, you don't have to share it if you don't want, but, you know, if you want to talk, I'm here to listen, or we have resources available, and really pushing that message. And then also telling the employees, I've been, in situations in like even operations meetings before where maybe we're touching on some HR topics that they want me to present to their team. And, me driving home the point while I have the opportunity to really say, like, hey guys, it's okay, you know, if if you're having a feeling or you're having a thought and you need help, like, don't be afraid, whether it's mental health assistance, whether it's even help, you don't know how to do something on the job. I've been really stressing that and telling a lot of our younger people that, because I think I think people they come out of college and they want to impress their boss. And I think we've gotten into a cycle in society where it became for a while, like if you raised your hand and said, I don't know how to do that, like it became a negative thing. And so we have people that aren't fully skilled and aren't speaking up and saying anything. And then that anxiety and pressure is sometimes becomes insurmountable. So just making sure that we're telling them, and I'm, stressing that to them, and the manager stressing to them that it's okay to say, hey, I need assistance with this. I need help. This is too much for me. I'm reaching a breaking point. I need to pull back. And making sure that we're being supportive of that is going to be huge. It's a little harder to do in the field. There's definitely, as you said, it is, the majority of our field staff is male. Um, but I tend to do it a lot when I'm talking one on one with people, especially people that seem to be a little bit of tougher nuts to crack. I introduce humor a lot and stuff like that. But I think it is making an impact here. Like I'm noticing an uptick in our EAP program usage, and just really, trying to get the message out there. So,
I mean, let's talk about a real form of bravery. Being able to admit that I'm maybe under a little bit more pressure than I can handle, even
mhm,
though our peers might look at us with a little bit of a side eye, because I know it's not easy. Because when we talk about people coming into a new job, we want to impress people, want to show them that
right.
we can handle and carry more than maybe what we can. And there was a story that you shared in our previous conversation, an individual to be unnamed, but
Hmm.
you had an individual in your team who was a young rising star, found
Hmm.
themselves in a position where they were being asked to do more, and they took it upon themselves to say, you know what? I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to have a conversation with you as an example that
Hmm.
says, I think I need to take a step back. Can you share that story? Because I feel like it was so powerful and hits
Yes,
home on exactly what we were talking about here.
absolutely. So we did have somebody in operations that was knocking it out of the park. Got a promotion to the next level, and very quickly became very overwhelmed. Probably on his manager's part, I understand the desire as a manager myself that you get nervous, especially in the job market we're in right now, that you want to keep people. But sometimes if you promote a little too soon, or you don't do that check in to make sure that the skill set is really where you need it to be and they're fully comfortable, that could be problematic. And that's what happened in this case. And he was mature enough to go to his manager and myself and say, you know, if you have to take the title and the money back, I really want to spend a little bit more time in the level below and really master some of these skills that I need so that I could be the most successful project manager for you. And his manager's boss had never dealt with that in his career. He's, again, very used to people either not speaking up and either leaving or flaming out or whatnot. And, I don't think he quite knew how to react. And I coached him through that and said, the fact that he was mature enough to say it, like, I have 10 times more respect for somebody like that than somebody that just keeps pushing and goes down the wrong path, and either burns out or royally screws something up and is trying to cover it up, and we reach a point where now we're talking about termination because they're missing the mark again and again. And we made sure that we did not take any of the money. We did quietly adjust the title. We did not, because we normally do like emails when we do promotions. We like to celebrate those wins. So we just quietly shifted some things on the back end for record keeping, and we told him that this is not a thing. Like, again, this is a positive thing, and I am pleased to say that not that long ago he's back up to where he was title wise and doing it and killing it. And I'm so glad that he spoke up. And you know I've told him before that I use him as an example. I said, I never say your name. I would never do that and out him, but that I love having that example to share with other people.
What a phenomenal way to build trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I feel like a leader's job is to create the safe space that allows people to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm not okay. Hey, I need to
Right.
take a step back. And they're not punished for that. Because at the end of
Right.
the day, if we're going to rush to fail, then that is a recipe for disaster. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes taking the slow path is a great way to be able to create sustainable success. And then when you're actually in the position and feel comfortable, you can show up better for everybody around you. And
Right.
so I just kind of want to, tip my hat to that individual who is unnamed. I want to tip my hat to you as a leader as well, because the trust element of business today, like we talk about from a human resources perspective, the human element of building trust with your team members is more important than ever. And being able to create that safe space for somebody, I feel like is just so incredibly powerful. But once again, it's the small things. It's the small things that make the biggest difference. And I know you do a lot of other small things like flexible PTO and
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate vulnerability to allow for people to kind of lean into the elements of maybe I just need to take a break today. I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about kind of how those small things have added up to help you build that trust element that we were kind of just talking about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, when COVID happened, everybody had to learn how to work from home. And we were, prior to COVID, like a lot of construction companies, we were fully in office. It was very regimented. It was everybody worked 8 to 5. You took an hour lunch from noon to 1, which is mind blowing to me because most of the time I keep working while I'm eating because I don't want to lose my momentum. And then, of course, we all had to go work from home. And then as we came back and as things continued to progress, you know, some people in leadership, especially I'll call them more old school thinking, were like, okay, when do we like turn off the work from home? And I was like, I don't think we totally do. I think we need to investigate a hybrid option, or we're going to lose all of our people because, quite honestly, our competition is not turning it off. I'm not saying we go fully remote. I think people interacting with one another is very important for mental health as well, um, and being around other adults and humans. But
I want to pause for a second because I want to
yeah,
talk about the framework of kind of challenging the older ideas of
hmm,
because I want to go back to that word trust. When we
yeah,
talk about flexible work, we talk about remote work, hybrid work. Often it seems like the root of not being able to embrace these types of flexible hybrid models is maybe a lack of trust. And I know that that's easy for
hmm,
leaders to be able to say, yeah, but what happens if it's a Friday? And do we
hmm.
actually know that they're working? I mean, like that entire dichotomy is really interesting. And I feel like the trust element is something that we really kind of want to lean into here in the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I told them from the start. I was like, we had people here that if you think they're not working now, they weren't working when they were they don't work just because they're here in the office.
Yeah.
you know, they, just because they're in your physical presence doesn't mean they were doing anything more productive than what they'd be doing at home. As a matter of fact, a lot of people find they're more productive from home. And that's what I kind of did challenge and said, like, if you don't trust your people, then why do you have them here? Like, this is pointless. I'm the type of leader, and I encourage my fellow managers to be the same. And the really successful ones here are that, if someone on my team, for example, they have the option of up to 2 days a week that they can work remote. Um, and do I know that on a Friday they are planted in front of their computer diligently working the whole 8 hours that they're supposed to be? No, I don't. But what I do know is that I know how much work is assigned to them. I know how long it takes because I've done it myself. I know it's getting done. And I know that when I reach out to them on Teams or, you know, I can see that there's interaction. And as long as they are making themselves available, if they knocked out a bunch of the, if you want to say, busy work that we all unfortunately still have to do to make things flow, if they worked really hard Monday through Thursday and on Friday they just want to sit there and monitor, I honestly don't care, like myself, because again, I'm looking at things in bigger chunks of time than just that minute to minute. I'm not a clock watcher. Um, I mentioned at the beginning that I have two new people, and I was noticing one of them starting to come in and stop in and say good morning to me every morning. And not that I'm against people, hey, how, good morning, how was your night? Or stopping in and saying, hey, have a nice weekend. But I'm like, just so you know, I don't know if you had to do this at past places, but I don't need, I'm cool. Like I'll know that you're here. Like I'll pop in and see you at some point. You don't have to feel like you have to come to
Checking
me.
in, just making
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Like we're not punching a clock here. We're good. So and I think the one especially did come from an environment like that and totally appreciates. She keeps saying, "Are you like a real person?" Like, because you seem too good to be true. Like, is there another side of you I haven't seen yet? And I was like, not really. I mean, I can have a temper on me from time to time, but you got to really do a lot to pull that out. So
It's just an interesting concept to me because I feel like because the world has changed, and I often use the reference of the generation of workers today is completely different on the other side of the pandemic. And when I say the generation of workers, that includes everybody. That means
right.
boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, everybody who's included. Everybody who's clocking in and getting a paycheck is a part of this new generation. And
Yep.
the way in which we approach work is completely different today because during the pandemic, I feel like leaders had to, out of necessity, demonstrate I'm going to have to trust my team to get the work done
Hmm.
because we don't have another way to get it done. And then
Right.
today, it seems like we have a interesting habit as humans of trying to go back to where we came from because we feel like
Hmm.
that's the safe place. And I
Yes.
want to kind of ask your opinion on, just in generalities, kind of the changing of leadership style, because it seems like what got us here is not going to get us there. And so we
Right.
have to continue to adapt and be curious enough as a leader to kind of lean into these little scary feelings of trusting our team to get their work done. But why do you think
Yes.
so many leaders of the old guard, if you will, struggle with that? And what is, I would say, the necessary formula to get them to kind of buy into this new workforce that's kind of out here in the world?
I'm not sure why some of them don't have the trust. I think about that often here because obviously we have a plethora of different people in leadership roles, at the executive level, and it's always interesting to me. I chalk some of it up to just from me doing a little bit of psychoanalysis of my own on my people here that they feel like people aren't working because while they were working from home, they had nothing to do.
Mm,
Like a lot of them do a lot of business development. They're dealing with clients. Um, they're just talking to people all day. So when you don't have actual work to do and all of a sudden you can't do that, I think a lot of them and I think this is that way across the board, like for all these businesses that went through this. If you yourself have nothing to do, you're automatically assuming that everyone else isn't doing anything or doesn't have anything to do either, and we're just paying them to hang out at home. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, and I've actually said that. I've said that to our CEO before because he has a hard time with it because he's like, I hate working from home, and I was like, yeah, but you can't really do your job effectively from home.
very
I mean,
true.
he could technically do it from anywhere, but again, his job is leading the company, and he's in meetings all day and stuff. And during COVID, he didn't have those clients to entertain, and he wasn't doing those things. So I think that's a big part of where that comes from. As far as how to overcome it, I don't know. My personal approach is to keep repeating the message over and over again until they get sick of hearing me, or to use examples. We have had some success here in just showing those examples of how that's working and kind of just challenging them directly and saying, explain to me, make it make sense why it wouldn't work this way for your team. What
Yeah,
are your
one
concerns and battling back at them.
Yeah, one of the things I think about is one of my favorite sayings, and I'll kind of reference it here to kind of tie my point together, is confidence does not come from shouting affirmations in the mirror or saying things are happening, but having a stack of undeniable proof that we are who we say we are and or the results are getting done. And it seems
Right.
like sometimes the proof is in the pudding, and sometimes
Hmm.
we just need to continue to do the work and show up and get the results in order for people to say, oh, I guess you're right. Because now when I look back, the work is getting done, and I guess we can lean into this. But it's a really
Yes.
scary feeling to kind of be unsure, if you will. And I guess out of control is a
Hmm.
good way to kind of frame it of your team, especially
Yes.
when they're in remote work environments, because unless we trust them, which is really scary for a lot of people, we're
Hmm.
never going to be able to see the results of it. And I feel like there's almost a little element of like insecurity that kind of comes in that too.
Yeah, and I think the people that have the most issue with it are the most insecure themselves. And I think in some cases, maybe they know that they can't handle it, and they kind of put that on somebody else. Maybe they know that they're not a self-starter, that they don't have the ability to stay focused all day, and they kind of insert those feelings onto other people. So yeah, just trying to kind of combat that. But it's definitely it always comes up like every couple months. They're like, "You think we should walk this back?" And I'm like, at the end of the day, you do what you want to do, but I think that would be disastrous. Like, I think we would have a mass exodus out of here. People want work life balance. And if I could be working from home one day and I could be tossing a load of dishes in the dishwasher after I finish my lunch before I sit back down, I mean, that means that my weekend is now freed up, that I can actually enjoy my time off and have that mental break that I need. So I don't feel like I'm 7 days a week doing something somewhere. And then come back the following week recharged and ready to tackle a new challenge.
I've been talking with a lot of leaders recently about the idea of work-life balance and why that made
Hmm.
so much sense before what we all went through as a global, I would say, experience in society. Work
Right.
was going to work, showing up, doing what you had to do, and then going back home. So it was easy to balance those things. But now when we talk about hybrid work, I like to kind of throw out the idea of work-life integration,
Hmm.
because it seems like the lines are getting blurred between our personal lives and our work lives, and it seems like they're meshing together. And so that
Hmm.
really is an integration activity, if you will, because
Hmm.
being able to have trust, being able to be curious enough how we can get our jobs done, but also integrating work into our regular lives seems like it's a necessary step for us to be successful in the future. So, what do you kind of think about that idea of work life integration instead of that balancing act?
I actually like that better because there are times where, I know myself, I will, you know, maybe on a weekend, I will have an idea, like something will just spark an idea in me. I'll be thinking about something and, not feeling like I have to have, and I personally don't feel this way, but I think a lot of other people do. They try to draw that line in the sand to have balance, but really embracing that and having it be seamless, I think will be the success in the future. Because we're in a 24/7 society, and that's globally, and that's I don't think that's changing anytime soon. So being able to turn it on, turn it off, and just seamlessly integrate that, um, I think is going to be key. It's going to be key too over the next several years for people with kids. That's a huge issue right now in the U.S., especially that childcare is not as readily available as it once was. And yeah, it's another thing I have to combat with managers here. Them getting frustrated that people are working from home with maybe kids there, and I'm like, listen, if somebody can make it work, and maybe they need to not be available from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, um, eat dinner with their family, and then maybe they're getting back on, after their kids go to bed. Like that's that's how we become successful. Like letting people work too when they're at their best. I think is another key point to this, and not having those rigid set hours. I know me personally, my brain is at its sharpest. You know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Like I get up, I get ready, I get in here early, and I knock out more stuff in the first few hours that I'm here than I do all day. Part of that is because of interruptions, but a bigger part of it is that's just when I'm, at my top mentally. So.
And that takes a lot of awareness too, because I think
Mhm.
about when you were talking about, taking a break from 2 to 4, so maybe you can pick up your kids and then you can bring them home and get everybody settled so then you can cop back into work. I feel like is a way to think about kind of the future of work. I know that was a big topic a couple of
Mhm.
years ago when we were talking about the future of work, but the future of work, in my opinion, is giving us the flexibility anchored in that idea of trust and saying, I know how much work needs to get done. Are you getting the work done? Okay, cool. Then you go get it done. I'm talking
Right.
to another leader on the podcast pretty soon, and she said something really cool to me. She said, we hire heavy and manage light. because we know how much work needs to get done. And at the end of the day, we trust the people who we hire because they're a part of our team. And I don't care
Right.
if you're doing your work at 11 o'clock at night, as long as you're communicating and getting the stuff done, better
Hmm.
to you. And that's kind
Right.
of a really, I think, progressive mindset and kind of how work looks today. Because when I think about my creative process, I'm incredibly sharp from like 5 a.m. until 9 a.m. because I'm uninterrupted, like you talked about.
Hmm.
But some of my most creative ideas come at nighttime when I'm coming home from the gym, when I'm listening to a podcast or I'm driving. Then all of a sudden, boom, idea pops up. And I'm like, oh, I
Yep.
should write that down. And that's kind of that back to that idea of integration. Because, like you
Right.
said, this is a 24-hour hustle. Whether you
Yeah.
like it or not, we clock in, but our minds are always kind of working on the things that we're passionate about, which I feel like is
Right.
so cool. Speaking of things that I'm passionate about, I want to kind of talk about leadership and the soft skills. So, soft skills are something that I'm incredibly passionate about today because they mean empathy, compassion, kind candor, curiosity, which we've talked about a little bit today. How do you kind of think about the soft skills and why they're becoming so much more prominent in leadership styles today compared to, the ways of Steve Jobs and the old guard of being sharp and ruling with an iron tongue and being a tyrant?
I love that that's the direction that society is going in, and that more and more people are embracing that. And that is definitely like one of my goals here for the upcoming over the next 2 years, is to really work on building those up in our leadership team here, that for the people that need to polish that a little bit more. um, I I just think it brings out the best in people. Like I watch people that lead that way, and I watch the people flourish under them, and the success come at a faster clip. And I love that it is like snuffing out the old school way of thinking. You know, I think that also goes hand in hand with also making sure that we're teaching. Like, one of the things, and I was just having a conversation at lunch with somebody today about, we like to promote from within here, which I think is wonderful, but people that are good at doing aren't necessarily good at leading. So I think really working on developing those skills is going to be the key to our success over the next, you know, 20, 30, 40 years, because people don't, people don't, they're not tolerating. Like, I think we're at a really interesting place in society nowadays where people are just saying, no, I've had enough. I'm not dealing with that anymore. Like, you're going to treat me like a human being, or I'm not going to work here. I don't need this. So it's been a really interesting dynamic shift that I hope continues, because I like, I like the idea of having empathy and remembering that everyone's a human, and just being respectful to one another. At the end of the day, are we all going to be best friends? Absolutely not. But if we can at least be kind and be decent to one another, I think that'll take us far.
And I feel like that's kind of where society has to move. If I think about looking at the political arena, because it's 2024 and we're recording this, it seems like the world is so divisive. It's either red
Hmm.
or blue. You stand on this side or you stand on that side. And I feel like a lot of people, especially who I'm talking to today, are talking about there has to be a middle ground. We have to
Yes.
be able to have a safe space to have conversations and debate and agree to disagree, but also respect each other in the process.
Right.
Because it's just a crazy time to think about kind of the future of work. I feel like the leverage has completely changed where we can't say, me as the employer are going to stand here and you either get with us or you get out, because the
Right.
future of the generations are saying, hey, listen, we need to be flexible and there has to be a middle ground in which we can be respected. And I think about
Hmm.
almost the idea of future proofing our organizations means we have to not be red or blue, but we have to be purple somewhere in the
Right.
middle, which is kind of like
Right.
a beautiful place to be.
Yes. And actually, we use that methodology when we, with our leadership team. So, like, each of our divisions, we have found that two-person teams make the best recipe for success. And we are very purposeful in, we don't typically let the person, like, if we just had somebody retire from one of our office locations the end of 2023, and it was our CEO and COO that selected the remaining partner there, his new partner. There were some feelings about that. I don't think that person was very happy about that, but the reason being is we want that type of meet in the middle. You know, even our CEO and our COO, personality wise, they are two completely different people and they think two completely different ways. But the beautiful part about that is that they very much they come together, and the compromise is exactly where we need it to be, which is down the middle, which is the best for the majority. Um, and so I love that we embrace that here, and I want to see more of that happen just across the board, because it does. I wish in our country that we could get that way politically. Maybe by 2028. I don't think some miracle is going to happen this year, unfortunately. But I say that even when the rare occasions I talk politics, like with family, like people just want middle ground. We don't, not these crazy extremes. Um, and our former CEO, I remember when we were having the discussions, about remote work and just changing and stuff. He had a very interesting statement that he made, and he goes, "I don't ever want to be the first."
Hmm.
He's like, "But we can't be the last. Like we need to be in the middle of the pack. We need to be adapting." I love the saying, like, if you don't adapt, you're going to die. Like you have to keep evolving.
I mean, my father always has a statement like that as well. He's like, the pioneers end up getting killed, and the people who come second, third, and fourth are the ones who are successful. And so
Right.
sometimes being the first is a disadvantage,
Mm-hmm.
but being somewhere who's going to follow that up, you definitely don't want
Yeah.
to be the last one there, though. And so that's
No.
just like a really important thing to kind of emphasize. I want
Yeah.
to kind of get your opinion on, because you're in the construction space and you're such a people centric leader, what does the future of Rycon look like underneath your watch? Because you guys are continuing to grow. What are some of the initiatives that you want to kind of implement, and what's the future that you want to see kind of in the culture of your organization?
Some of the more short term goals that we want to implement is definitely a more structured, like, learning management system so that we can make sure that we're preparing our people, and getting them the access to training that they need. We have a more structured onboarding now, but I still think that it happens where people end up getting into a baptism by fire type of situation, and that usually ends up uh, going poorly. Um, Another thing is really focusing on employee communication and performance management. One of the things that we just kicked off is going to a biannual performance review process, and the review itself isn't anything different than we've done in the past. But what I've really emphasized is with the managers is, it's not the filling out of the form and actually rating the individual. Like, obviously that's important and you want to memorialize that and you want to give the feedback. But what's more important to me is them having those one-on-one conversations, them taking that and actually, reading the employee self-assessment, which is something that we've never done before. And I think that's been eye-opening. Like, one of the questions on our employee self-assessment is, um, do I feel valued here at Rycon? And there's a drop down, and there's several different things to select, including I don't feel valued at all. That type of information for a manager is huge, because most employees are not going to come to you and say, "Hey, I'm about to go apply for another job because I don't think you appreciate me." Most people aren't that vocal. It's been interesting because I've been kind of monitoring how things are going. I can clearly see all of it in my role, and people are being honest, and I love it. And even some of the feedback I'm getting from one-on-ones, because I've been doing like spot checks of people that have already been through the process. They're really they're really liking it. It's opening up conversations that I don't think would have happened organically otherwise. Um, Sorry, I'm just losing my. Told you
No,
I'm not
I
great.
want, no, it's totally
Not
cool. One
great
of the
this
things that
late in the afternoon.
one of the things I heard this from a business leader one time. He said, the more ways you measure, the more ways you can win. And when I
Yes.
think about the frequency of being able to get survey data back, It
Yep.
gives us the ability to pivot quicker. Because one of my favorite sayings in business is new data, new decisions. And I
Yep.
feel like when we have an annual review, as an example, the data gathering process is too sparse. It's too
Yes.
inconsistent. And so it's very difficult to make pivots when we're saying, here's your annual review, employee. This is what
Mm-hmm.
we're going to change this year. But there are so many opportunities to gather data in between the middle time so we can make better
Yep.
pivots and better decisions. And I feel like that's just a really cool way that you guys are embracing that kind of mindset of the more ways you measure, the more ways you can win.
Yes. Our COO, he is huge on data. Like that's he loves it. He wants to digest it. He wants to, use that to really make strong strategic business decisions. So we're not just like, throwing a dart at the wall and hoping for the best. And he's really big on that, and I love that because that means he's very supportive of those types of initiatives that I want to do. Another thing that I want to kick off is when I started here, I started doing exit interviews because, again, I think you can get some valuable data. Um, However, I really want to focus on doing check ins with employees, stay interviews, whatever you want to call them, and really start to get that pulse of people. Like I said, for the employees that I have gotten to know really well, I can kind of sense when something's off and I can kind of dig, but it's a lot harder. And the more we grow, it's going to be even harder to do that, especially being from all over the place. Um, so I think that's going to be very valuable in making sure that we're getting out in front of potential problems before they become a big problem.
We have this exact philosophy in business is our customer success, which is our love and loyalty team, makes as
Mm-hmm.
many touch points as possible that are not about business, but are about personal things to establish a relationship. Because when you have a relationship with somebody, you have the ability to have those intimate offhand conversations about a
Mm-hmm.
fire that is now smoke. But before it breaks into a real issue, you can get ahead of those things. And that's something
Right.
that we embody. And I love that you're kind of emphasizing those human touch points because that personal relationship is a great
Mm-hmm.
way to say, hey, Heather, I have an issue. How should I deal with this? And being able to get ahead of those type of things.
Right, right. And we, in the construction industry, especially, relationships are everything. That is, at the end of the day, probably one of the most key things to our industry. Whether it's a relationship with a client, a relationship with a subcontractor. So we rely heavily on that because you're dealing with a lot of the same people over and over. And to your point, we even have clients that are probably a little more gracious with us because we've done a great job in the past, or there's a close personal relationship with somebody here that maybe they give us a little more grace if something goes a little off the rails, and give us a chance to correct it.
I mean, relationships are a superpower. And I want to kind of hammer home before we kind of land the plane here with a story.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a individual, a lady who had really bad health problems and she had multiple surgeries and ended up having to sue the doctors who she had who performed those surgeries. Going back, the attorney was looking at the different surgeries and actually found out that the person who made the biggest mistake in her health journey was her primary care doctor, and presented this to this lady and said, hey, we know that you have this big issue and we're suing this person, but it was actually your PCP. The lady came back and said, Sarah, that's interesting because I love Sarah. So, you know what? Let's just drop the entire suit in general. And so it talks about the relationships that we have with
Right,
people are so fundamental, but they're a superpower in business to keep us from being in any type of trouble or litigation. And that's
right,
just kind of a
right.
little funny story that I want to hammer home on the importance of relationships in business because they are a superpower.
Oh, for
As we
sure.
as we kind of wrap here with my little anecdote, I want to give you the opportunity to pose a next question for our next guest. So what do you got
Okay.
for us, Heather?
So I actually gave this some thought last night, and my question is for the next guest how they feel that social media is having an impact on employees in general, on the job market, on HR, and just on the pressures that, like, what is that doing to introduce new challenges into the workplace?
I love that. That's an amazing question. That's the first time we've had anybody take the element of what the societal pressure looks like
Yeah.
in our personal lives and how it's impacting our professional lives as well. So for everybody who has been watching and listening today, Heather, I just want to say, seriously, thank you so much for coming on the HR Heroes podcast. You are the definition of an HR hero who is making tremendous small changes, leading with empathy, compassion, creating safe spaces for your team, and really changing an industry and the reputation that comes along with that. So I just want to say, from me sitting across this virtual table with you, it's been amazing to be able to spend this time together. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for encouraging me to go out of my comfort zone and do something like this that isn't normally my forte. So it's been
Well, you did an
fun.
amazing job. Absolutely. Well, guys, that's been another episode of our HR Heroes podcast. That's a wrap.